What if you woke up in an African tribe in 1500 BCE? Hey guys, welcome back to another absolutely terrifying historical journey that'll make you question whether you could survive even 24 hours in conditions that our ancestors lived through for thousands of years. Tonight we're traveling back 500 years to ancient Africa, long before kingdoms, long before writing, long before anything resembling civilization as we know it, to experience life in a tribal society where lions hunt humans, where every plant could poison you, and where your survival depends on skills you absolutely don't possess. Before we dive into this nightmare where modern knowledge is completely useless, and where nature is actively trying to kill you every single day, smash that like button. If you've ever wondered what it would be like to live without technology, medicine, or any modern comfort, subscribe for more time-traveling adventures through humanity's most challenging periods, and drop a comment. Could you survive in ancient Africa with nothing but stone tools, tribal knowledge you don't have, and predators that view humans as prey? Now get comfortable in your safe, climate-controlled room, and let's discover what really happens when you wake up in an African tribe in 1500 BCE. A world so dangerous and alien that it makes every other historical period look easy by comparison. Waking up in a world that wants you dead. Your eyes open to darkness and the most overwhelming assault of sounds you've ever experienced. Not the gentle sounds of nature you might hear camping, but a cacophony of animal noises that signal genuine danger. The distant roar of lions that are closer than you'd like, the whooping calls of hyenas that hunt in packs, the trumpeting of elephants, the grunting of hippos in nearby water, and countless other sounds from creatures you can't identify but which your primal brain recognizes as threats. The darkness is absolute in ways that modern people never experience. No street lights, no light pollution, no ambient glow from electronics or buildings. Just pure blackness broken only by dying embers from a fire that's providing your only protection from nocturnal predators. The smells hit you next. Wood smoke from the fire, yes, but also the overwhelming organic scent of a human settlement with no sanitation, unwashed bodies including your own, animal hides curing or rotting, human waste, cooking fires, the earthy smell of the dwelling structure itself, and underlying everything is the scent of the African wilderness that surrounds the camp. Vegetation, animals, and the distinctive smell of dry savanna, or tropical forest depending on where exactly you've landed. Your modern nose, accustomed to deodorant, air fresheners and general cleanliness, finds the olfactory assault nearly unbearable. You're lying on something that might generously be called a sleeping mat, woven grass or animal hides laid directly on the ground, with no padding, no pillow, nothing resembling a modern bed. Your body aches from sleeping on the hard surface, and you can feel bites from insects that have been feeding on you throughout the night. Mosquitoes certainly, but also other bugs you can't identify, their bites itching intensely and possibly carrying diseases that will kill you if you don't have immunity. You're wearing almost nothing, perhaps a simple leather or bark cloth wrapped around your waist if you're lucky, leaving most of your body exposed to elements, insects, and the gaze of others in this communal living situation. The dwelling you're in is primitive beyond anything you've imagined, perhaps a simple hut made from branches, grass and mud, or maybe just a windbreak providing minimal shelter from elements. There are no walls in the modern sense, no door, no privacy, no security against animals or other humans except for the fire and the presence of other tribe members sleeping nearby. You can see the sky through gaps in the roof structure, and you realize that this shelter wouldn't protect you from serious rain, wouldn't keep out determined predators, and is basically just a slightly more organized version of sleeping completely exposed in the wilderness. Other people are sleeping around you in this communal space. You can hear their breathing, their snoring, the sounds of children whimpering or crying, the movements of people shifting in their sleep. There's no concept of personal space or privacy. Everyone lives together, sleeps together, performs most life functions in view of the entire group, because privacy is a luxury that doesn't exist when survival depends on group cooperation and constant vigilance against threats that could kill isolated individuals. And then the sounds outside change. Something large is moving near the camp, and you hear human voices, suddenly alert and urgent, speaking in a language that sounds nothing like anything you've ever heard. First realization: this isn't your world anymore. People around you are stirring, reaching for weapons, spears with stone points, wooden clubs, possibly bows with stone-tipped arrows, and moving toward the edge of camp where something is triggering their alarm. You don't understand the language they're speaking, but the tone is clear: danger, threat, something that requires armed response. Your modern instinct is to grab your phone and call for help, but of course there are no phones, no police, no emergency services, no one to call except the very people who are already responding to whatever threat is approaching. A man who seems to be a leader is giving orders. His authority is obvious from how others defer to him and respond to his commands. He's pointing, directing people to positions, organizing a defense against whatever is out there in the darkness, just beyond the firelight. You have no idea what you're supposed to do, no weapons training, no understanding of the threat or the appropriate response, and your paralysis marks you as either useless or potentially dangerous to the group's survival. The danger becomes clear as massive shape moves into the edge of firelight. A lion, or possibly multiple lions, attracted to the human settlement by the smell of meat, the presence of vulnerable humans, or simply because lions in ancient Africa view humans as legitimate prey rather than as apex predators to be avoided. The lion is enormous, far larger than zoo animals you might have seen, a wild predator in its prime that has killed many times, and that sees your group as potential food rather than as threats to be feared. The tribe's response is coordinated and practiced. Warriors move into defensive positions with spears ready, others grab burning branches from the fire to wave at the predator, some start making loud noises to intimidate the animal, and everyone works together in ways that demonstrate this isn't their first encounter with dangerous wildlife. You stand there uselessly, unable to help, not knowing whether to grab a weapon you don't know how to use, to make noise, to run, or to simply stay out of the way of people who actually know what they're doing. The lion eventually retreats, whether because the organized defense intimidated it, because it decided easier prey was available elsewhere, or because it was just testing the camp's defenses, you can't know. But the encounter has driven home a terrifying reality. You're in ancient Africa around 150–100 BCE, approximately 3,500 years before your own time, in a world where humans aren't dominant but are just another species in an ecosystem filled with predators and countless other threats that can kill you easily and quickly. The realization hits you that you have no survival skills for this environment, no knowledge of which plants are edible, no ability to make tools or weapons, no understanding of how to track animals or avoid predators, and that your continued survival depends entirely on the tolerance and help of people who speak a language you don't understand, and who follow customs and rules you know nothing about. Meeting your tribal family, strangers who own your life. As dawn breaks and the immediate danger has passed, you get your first clear look at the people you're apparently living with, and who constitute your family in this ancient world. They're anatomically modern humans like yourself, but their lives and bodies show the effects of a harsh existence you've never experienced. The adults are lean and muscular, from constant physical activity and marginal nutrition. Their skin bears scars from injuries that would have received medical treatment in your time, but which here just healed on their own, or didn't, killing the person. Their teeth are worn from eating coarse food and often damaged or missing from accidents or infection. And their eyes show the weariness of people who've watched friends and family die from causes they can't prevent or understand. An older woman who seems to be some kind of mother or aunt figure approaches you with concern in her eyes. Clearly your behavior during the lion encounter was wrong, or insufficient, and she's trying to figure out what's wrong with you. She speaks to you in the tribal language, words that you can't understand at all, sounds that don't map onto any language family you're aware of. When you don't respond appropriately, she touches your forehead as if checking for fever, examines your eyes, and speaks to others with tones that suggest she's discussing whether you're sick, possessed, or somehow damaged. Children stare at you with curiosity. They range from infants to adolescents, all wearing minimal clothing or none at all, all showing signs of parasitic infections, distended bellies, skin condition, all frighteningly thin by modern standards but apparently healthy by the measures of this time and place. They're not shy or cautious around you. In tribal societies, children learn early to be independent and bold, and these kids are already more capable of survival in this environment than you'll ever be despite your adult size and modern education. Men are returning from checking the perimeter,
satisfied that the lion has truly left for now, but making clear through gestures and tone that constant vigilance is necessary because predators will return. One man, who seems to be your father or uncle in this reality, looks at you with disappointment that crosses language barriers. You failed to help during the danger. You stood there uselessly while others risked their lives to protect the group, and your behavior marks you as either a coward or as someone who's fundamentally broken and unable to fulfill the basic obligations of tribal membership. Your dwelling is one of perhaps 15 or 20 similar structures arranged in a loose circle around a central area where the main fire burns. You can see other tribal members going about morning routines, women starting fires at individual family, people checking on animals. There are some domesticated animals, possibly dogs or proto-cattle depending on the specific time and location, children being sent to fetch water from a nearby river or spring, hunters preparing weapons and discussing the day's plan. This is your new life, your new family, your new world, and you understand almost nothing about how it works or how to survive in it. But before you can even begin to process the social dynamics, you need to understand basic facts about where and when you are, which tribe you're part of, and what role you're expected to play in this ancient African society.
Which tribe are you in? Location matters for survival. Over the next several hours and days, as you desperately try to communicate through gestures and observation while people debate what's wrong with you and whether you're worth keeping alive, you begin piecing together information about your location and circumstances. You're somewhere in sub-Saharan Africa, probably in the eastern or central regions based on the climate and vegetation you're seeing. This could be the Great Lakes region, the Ethiopian highlands, the Upper Nile Valley, or the savanna zones of East Africa. The specific location matters enormously for your survival, because different regions have different resources, different dangers, and different cultural developments. The landscape around the camp is a mix of savanna grasslands and scattered acacia trees, with a river or stream nearby that provides water, but which also attracts dangerous wildlife, including crocodiles and hippos. The vegetation suggests you're in a semi-arid region with distinct wet and dry seasons, meaning that survival strategies need to account for seasonal variation in water and food availability. You're not in dense jungle. This is more open country where visibility is good, but where that also means predators can see you from far away, and where there's limited cover when danger approaches. The tribe you're part of is probably semi-nomadic, practicing a combination of hunting, gathering, fishing, and possibly some early forms of pastoralism or proto-agriculture, depending on the specific date and location. The camp structure suggests it's meant to be somewhat permanent, but also potentially movable if resources become scarce or if threats, whether from animals, other tribes, or environmental changes make relocation necessary. Population is small, maybe 30-50 people total in your band, which is typical for hunter-gatherer groups that need large territories to support their subsistence strategy. Technology is Stone Age in the most literal sense. Tools are made from stone, especially sharp flakes and points, wood, bone, animal hides, and plant fibers. There's no metal of any kind, no pottery, or only very crude pottery, no woven textiles beyond simple plant fiber work, and nothing that resembles advanced technology. Fire is precious and carefully maintained because starting new fires is difficult and time-consuming with the friction or percussion methods available. Every tool, every weapon, every useful object is made by hand from natural materials, and the skill required to make these things is far beyond your modern capabilities. The tribal structure and social organization reveal a complex society despite the technological simplicity. Tribal structure and hierarchy. Know your place or die. The tribe has clear social hierarchies and defined roles, even though there's no writing, no formal laws, and no institutional structures in the modern sense. Leadership seems to be based on a combination of age, proven ability, kinship connections, and possibly spiritual or shamanic power. The man who gave orders during the lion encounter is clearly the chief or primary leader, with authority based on his demonstrated courage, hunting prowess, strategic thinking, and maybe his lineage or connection to previous leaders. There's also a shaman or spiritual leader, an older man or woman who seems to have special status, and who others consult about matters beyond the purely physical. The shaman wears distinctive decorations including animal bones, shells, or other objects that mark spiritual authority, and seems to be involved in determining whether you're experiencing normal illness, spiritual possession, or some kind of curse or supernatural affliction. The shaman's role is crucial in tribal society because they interpret events, perform healing rituals, mediate between the human and spirit worlds, and help maintain social cohesion through religious ceremonies and tradition. Warriors or hunters form another distinct class, younger men in their physical prime who provide the tribe's main defense against predators and enemies, while also being responsible for hunting large game that supplies much of the tribe's protein. These men receive status and preferential treatment, including access to better food and more desirable marriage partners, in exchange for risking their lives regularly. Your failure to act during the lion encounter has marked you as someone who doesn't belong to this category, which affects your social standing and how others view your worth to the group. Women have their own hierarchies based on age, number of surviving children, gathering skills, and their relationships to powerful men. Older women with multiple surviving children and good gathering skills have significant authority over younger women and make important decisions about food distribution, childcare, and other domestic matters that are crucial to tribal survival. Women's gathering activities actually provide most of the tribe's calories. Hunting is less reliable than gathering in most environments. So despite what might seem like male dominance in visible roles like fighting and hunting, women's work is equally essential and provides them with significant informal power. Kids start helping with simple tasks as soon as they're physically capable, progressing to more complex and dangerous work as they grow. By early adolescence, children are performing most of the same work as adults, and formal adulthood comes through initiation ceremonies that test courage, endurance, and competence, rather than through arbitrary age milestone. And your own role in this structure is deeply uncertain because you can't perform the basic tasks that define adult status. Your role in the tribe, deadweight or valuable member, you're apparently an adult based on your physical body, which means the tribe expects you to fulfill adult obligations, contributing to food acquisition, defending the group when threatened, participating in rituals and ceremonies, eventually producing children to continue the group's existence. But your incompetence at every basic survival skill marks you as essentially useless, by tribal standards, someone who consumes resources without producing equivalent value, which in resource-scarce environments is a death sentence, unless the group has reasons to keep you alive despite your lack of productivity. Your physical condition reveals your modern origins in ways that make tribal members suspicious and confused. Your hands are soft without the calluses that come from using stone tools and weapons daily. Your teeth are healthier than theirs, thanks to modern dentistry before your displacement. But you lack the jaw strength and tooth wear they associate with normal eating patterns. Your skin shows no significant scarring from the minor injuries that are constant in tribal life. Your feet are tender from a lifetime in shoes rather than being tough from walking barefoot on rough ground. Everything about your physical condition screams wrong, even though you're obviously human. Some tribe members argue for abandoning you or killing you as a burden the group can't afford to support. In resource-scarce environments where everyone must contribute to survival, dead weight gets eliminated quickly because the alternative is putting productive members at risk. Others argue you might be valuable once you learn or recover from whatever ailment or curse has made you incompetent. Perhaps you're from another tribe and will eventually remember your skills, or maybe you have spiritual significance that the shaman can determine through appropriate rituals and consultations. The shaman performs what you recognize as diagnostic rituals, examining you for signs of spiritual possession, preparing herbal concoctions that might treat illness or expel evil spirits, conducting ceremonies that involve the whole tribe in determining your status and whether you should be helped, abandoned, or eliminated. You're being evaluated not just on your current capabilities but on your potential worth to the group, and the decision about your fate will be collective rather than individual, based on the group's assessment of whether supporting you benefits or threatens their survival. And while the tribe debates your fate, you're desperately trying to learn the basics of survival, in an environment that's actively trying to kill you every single day. Speaking ancient African language. Sounds you can't make. The language barrier isn't just inconvenient. It's potentially fatal when your inability to understand warnings, instructions, or social cues can result in offending the tribe, violating taboos, or missing crucial information about immediate dangers. The tribal language you're hearing sounds nothing like any modern African languages you might be familiar with. This is 3,500 years before present, meaning the language families and dialects that exist now haven't developed yet, and what you're hearing might be a linguistic ancestor to modern languages, or might be from a completely different language family that died out without leaving descendant languages that survived to modern times. The phonetics are challenging for your modern vocal cords. There are click consonants, similar to those in Kosan languages, tonal variations where pitch changes meaning entirely, sounds produced in the back of the throat or with airflow patterns that don't exist in English or other Indo-European languages, and rhythms and stress patterns that are completely foreign to you. Your attempts to reproduce sounds you're hearing come out mangled and wrong, marking you as either foreign or as having some kind of speech defect, both of which lower your social status and make others view you with suspicion or pity. Vocabulary is built on concepts and categories that don't map well onto modern languages. They have dozens of words for different types of water sources, flowing versus standing, clear versus muddy, animal accessible versus human only. Because water quality is literally life or death important. They have complex terminology for tracking game animals that references subtle signs in dirt, vegetation and animal behavior that you can't even perceive, let alone describe. They have kinship terms that specify exact relationships in ways that English cousin or uncle completely fail to capture. Their conceptual categories are organized around survival priorities rather than modern abstraction. Grammar might be completely unlike anything you've encountered. Word order might convey different information than in English. Verb tenses might mark whether you witnessed something directly or heard about it secondhand. Evidentiality that English doesn't grammatically require. Nouns might be classified into categories based on animacy, shape or other features that seem arbitrary to you but which structure how speakers think about objects and relationship. The linguistic structure reflects their worldview and survival needs in ways that are invisible to outsiders who don't understand why the language works the way it does. And beyond just vocabulary and grammar, there are entire communicative systems involving gesture, tone and social context that you're completely ignorant of. Learning through survival. When mistakes kill time. Your language education happens through immersion in high-stakes situations where misunderstanding can have immediate lethal consequences. A tribal member urgently tells you something while pointing at vegetation, but you don't understand whether they're warning you about a venomous snake hiding there, telling you about an edible plant, describing a property boundary you shouldn't cross, or communicating something else entirely. Your blank confusion frustrates them and puts both of you at risk if the communication was time-sensitive. Children become your primary teachers because they have patience for your incompetence and because teaching you gives them status among their peers. Being better at something than an adult is novel and entertaining for kids who are usually the ones being instructed. A young girl shows you which plants are safe to eat by collecting them, eating some herself, and then offering you a taste while using exaggerated gestures and repetition to convey safe and good. A boy demonstrates how to start a fire using the bow drill method, breaking down the process into steps while speaking slowly and simply as if teaching a small child or someone mentally impaired. Adults are less patient but more systematic when they do teach you. A hunter takes you along on an outing, probably so someone can watch you rather than leaving you unsupervised in camp, and uses the opportunity to teach through demonstration, showing you how to move quiet, how to read tracks, how to identify game animals at a distance, how to avoid startling dangerous animals. He doesn't waste time with abstract explanations, he just demonstrates and expects you to observe and learn, correcting you sharply when you make noise or do something stupid that scares away game or attracts predators. Women teaching you gathering skills are somewhere between children's patience and hunters' efficiency. They need you to learn fast enough to be useful rather than being dead weight. But they're also used to teaching practical skills to children and incorporating learners into work groups. You follow women's gathering expeditions, watching which plants they collect, how they process them, where they find the best resources, and what dangers they avoid. Your hands get cut and scratched from handling rough plant materials you don't know how to process properly. But the physical pain reinforces learning in ways that classroom education never could. But the most dangerous aspect of language learning is that certain words and phrases carry meanings you can't guess, and violating them could get you killed or expelled. Every sound could mean death. Taboos and sacred words. The tribal language includes taboo words and phrases that you can only learn by violating them and facing the consequences. You repeat what sounds like a normal word only to have everyone react with shock, anger, or fear because you've unknowingly invoked a spirit name, broken a verbal taboo, or said something obscene or blasphemous. The shaman is called to perform purification rituals because your ignorant violation has spiritually contaminated people who heard you.
And you're warned through gestures and tones, since you still don't understand, never to make those sounds again. Names have power in tribal belief systems and aren't used casually. Speaking someone's actual name can be taboo, except in specific ritual contexts, with people instead being referred to through kinship terms, nicknames, or indirect phrases. Dead people's names are especially dangerous. Speaking the name of deceased tribal members risks calling their spirits back or disturbing their rest, which could bring bad luck, illness, or death to the speaker and the whole tribe. You don't know these rules and can't guess them from context until you've violated them multiple times. Sacred language used in rituals and ceremonies is different from everyday speech. Shamanic chants use archaic vocabulary and grammar that even regular tribal members don't fully understand, creating linguistic distinction between sacred and profane, similar to how Latin was used in Catholic masses, or how Sanskrit functions in Hindu ritual. You're expected to participate in ceremonies by repeating phrases you don't understand, and getting the sounds wrong is considered spiritually dangerous even when you're trying your best to reproduce what you're hearing. Animal names might be taboo during hunts or in certain contexts. Hunters might use code words or indirect phrases to discuss their prey because speaking the animal's true name is believed to alert it to the hunt or to show disrespect that will anger the animal's spirit. You don't know these codes and might accidentally use direct language that makes hunters angry or that they believe has ruined the hunt by breaking spiritual protocols that are supposed to ensure success and safety. And while you're struggling to master basic communication without accidentally offending spirits or violating taboos, you're also trying to learn the practical survival skills that might keep you alive long enough to become competent.
Water, food, shelter. The trinity of survival bios. The most immediate and constant concern is water. Humans can survive only a few days without it, and finding clean, safe water in 1500 BCE Africa is far more difficult and dangerous than modern people realize. The nearby river that provides the tribe's primary water source is also home to crocodiles that view humans as prey, hippos that are extremely territorial and aggressive, killing more humans than any other African animal, and various parasites and pathogens that cause diseases you don't have immunity to. Women do most water collection because it's considered less risky than hunting, but it's still dangerous work that kills people regularly. You're expected to help carry water despite having no experience with the heavy clay pots or woven containers the tribe uses. The containers are awkward to balance on your head or shoulder in ways that tribal women manage effortlessly through practice since childhood, and your attempts result in spilled water, broken containers, and frustrated companions who view you as clumsy and wasteful. Water is precious enough that wasting it through incompetence is considered serious offense, and you're sternly corrected when you're careless with this life-essential resource. Food acquisition is divided between hunting, primarily men's work providing protein, gathering, primarily women's work providing most calories, and fishing, mixed gender participation depending on the specific tribe and location. You're completely incompetent at all three. You can't hunt because you don't know how to make or use weapons, can't track animals, can't move quietly enough to approach game, and would probably freeze or panic if actually faced with a dangerous animal. You can't gather effectively because you don't know which plants are edible versus poisonous, where to find the best resources, or how to process plant materials into usable food. You can't fish because you don't know the techniques and don't have the patience or skill to be successful. Shelter is communal but requires constant maintenance. The huts need regular repair after storms or simply from normal wear, requiring knowledge of which wood and grasses to use, how to weave them together securely, how to waterproof structures with mud or other materials, and how to orient buildings to provide best protection from sun, rain, and wind. Your modern construction knowledge is useless when you don't have nails, screws, power tools, or any of the building materials and techniques you might vaguely remember from home improvement shows. And the tools that make everything else possible are themselves incredibly difficult to make and use when you have no relevant skills or training. Tools made from nothing. Stone Age technology is hard. Stone tool making, knapping is far more difficult than it looks in museum displays or anthropology textbooks. Creating sharp cutting tools by striking stones together to flake off pieces requires understanding rock angles of impact, force control, and precise hand-eye coordination that takes years to develop. Your attempts to make simple stone flakes result in crushed fingers, useless rock fragments, and wasted materials that took effort to collect. Tribal members who are expert knappers watch your failures with barely concealed contempt for your incompetence at this fundamental survival skill. Wooden tools require knowledge of which woods are best for different purposes,
Spear shafts need to be straight, strong and flexible enough not to break on impact. Digging sticks need to be hard enough to penetrate tough ground without splintering. Bow wood needs specific elasticity and strength. Fire starting wood requires friction properties that produce hot dust. You can't identify these woods by sight and wouldn't know how to work them properly even if someone pointed out the right trees. Every wooden tool is a sophisticated piece of engineering that tribal artisans have perfected through generations of accumulated knowledge that you lack completely. Hide processing for leather and cordage is disgusting and technically demanding. Raw animal hides must be scraped clean of fat and tissue. Hard physical labor with stone scrapers that leaves your hands cramped and bloody. Treated with brain matter or other natural chemicals to prevent rotting smells awful. And requires precise technique. Stretched and dried properly, timing and tension matter. And worked until supple, more physical labor. You ruin hides through improper processing, wasting valuable resources that require dangerous hunting to obtain, further establishing your reputation as incompetent and wasteful. Fire maintenance and starting is crucial and difficult. The tribe maintains fires constantly because starting new fires with friction or percussion methods takes significant time and effort, even for experienced practitioners. You're expected to help maintain fires by feeding appropriate wood, managing heat levels for cooking or tool making, collecting dry fuel and never letting fires go completely out. Your modern dependence on matches and lighters has left you without the skills to start fire from scratch, and you're terrified of being responsible for a fire going out because restarting it would expose your fundamental incompetence. But even more basic than tools is the ability to identify what in the environment can help you versus what will kill you. And you don't have this knowledge at all, for you have no modern comfort. Everything hurts all the times. The physical reality of daily life without any modern conveniences creates constant discomfort that modern people never experience. You wake up with your whole body aching from sleeping on hard ground. Your feet are cut and bruised from walking barefoot on rough terrain covered in thorns, sharp rocks and other hazards. Your skin is sunburned, insect bitten, scratched from vegetation, and developing sores from dirt and sweat in a context where bathing is infrequent and involves cold water from the river. Your hands are cramped from using primitive tools with blisters that break and bleed and then get infected because there's no antiseptic or bandaging. Hunger is constant because the tribe rarely has enough food for everyone to feel full. You get smaller portions than productive members because you contribute less. And even when you do eat, the food is strange and often unpalatable by modern tastes. Tough meat with gristle and seed plant matter. Foods with textures and flavors you find repulsive but which you must eat because refusing food is wasteful and offensive. You're losing weight rapidly, your body consuming its own fat and muscle to make up the caloric deficit, and you're constantly thinking about food in ways that occupy mental energy you need for learning survival skill. Heat during the day and cold at night create temperature extremes your modern body isn't adapted for. During midday sun, you're desperately seeking shade and water to avoid heat exhaustion or heat stroke, while at night you're huddling close to the fire and other bodies for warmth because the temperature drops dramatically once the sun sets. Your modern thermoregulation expectations, room temperature year-round, are completely violated, and you're either too hot or too cold most of the time, never quite comfortable, always physically stressed by temperature extreme. Parasites and infections are inevitable and untreatable. You have intestinal worms from eating meat that wasn't cooked thoroughly, giving you digestive problems and robbing you of nutrition. You have lice in your hair and fleas on your body despite attempts at grooming. You have fungal infections on your feet and in skin folds from moisture and dirt. You have dental problems developing from unfamiliar diet and inability to clean teeth properly. Every physical discomfort compounds the others, creating cumulative suffering that wears you down psychologically as well as physically. And all of this disgust and incompetence is just preparation for learning the actual skills that might let you contribute to the tribe's survival rather than being deadweight they're keeping alive out of pity or spiritual obligation.
The hunt begins. Tracking death through the savannah. Your first hunting expedition is terrifying and humiliating in equal measure. The hunting party consists of 5 men, all experienced warriors and hunters, who move through the landscape with a grace and awareness you can't hope to match. They travel lightly armed with spears whose stone points are wickedly sharp and carefully hafted to wooden shafts, possibly bows with stone-tipped arrows, wooden clubs as backup weapons, and stone knives tucked into bark cloth or leather wraps. They've left before dawn to take advantage of cooler temperatures and animal movement patterns at sunrise, and they expect to cover many miles searching for game. The hunters track animals through signs you can't even perceive, Slight disturbances in grass where something passed hours ago. Distinctive hoof prints in soft ground identifying specific species and age of animals. Droppings that tell experienced trackers how recently an animal was here and what it was eating. Browsed vegetation showing feeding patterns and direction of travel. And countless other subtle clues that build a mental map of where game might be found. The hunters discuss these signs in low voices, debating which tracks to follow based on factors you don't understand. Some tracks are too old, some lead toward difficult terrain, some suggest the animal has already been hunted by predators and won't provide good meat. You're expected to carry water and backup equipment while staying quiet and following the lead hunter's directions. Simple instructions like stop, crouch, move left are communicated through hand signals and whispered words, but you're so focused on not tripping or making noise that you miss half the signals and constantly need redirecting. The other hunters are visibly frustrated by your incompetence. You're slowing them down, potentially alerting game to their presence, and generally being a liability rather than an asset to the hunt. The first game sighting is a group of antelope grazing in open grassland. The hunters stop immediately, motioning for absolute silence and stillness because antelope have excellent vision and hearing and will flee at the slightest alarm. They spend what feels like forever studying the herd, noting wind direction to ensure their scent doesn't carry to the animals, identifying which animals are young, old, sick and therefore easier targets, planning approach routes that use every slight dip in terrain or scattered brush for concealment, and generally applying expertise that you completely lack. The approach and attempted kill reveal how difficult and dangerous hunting actually is, and how useless you are in this context. Gathering wild foods. Nothing is what it seems. While men are out hunting, which often fails to produce meat, women's gathering activities are actually providing the majority of the tribe's calories through collecting plant foods, insects, eggs, small animal, and other resources that don't require dangerous confrontation with large game. You join the gathering group, mostly women and children, but also some older men and injured warriors who can't participate in hunts, and immediately discover that gathering is far more complex and difficult than just picking berries and digging roots. Identifying edible versus poisonous plants requires knowledge that's literally life or death important. Many edible plants have poisonous lookalikes that differ only in subtle ways: leaf shape, growth patterns, smell, or season. Some plants are edible only when properly processed. Certain roots must be pounded, soaked and cooked to remove toxins, while eating them raw would cause severe illness or death. Some plants are edible in one season but toxic in another. The women test unfamiliar plants by touching them to lips, watching for burning or numbness, eating tiny amounts and waiting to see if sickness develops, and generally using trial and error methods that occasionally result in poisoning despite their caution. You repeatedly reach for plants that gatherers slap your hand away from, sometimes because they're poisonous, sometimes because they're sacred or taboo, sometimes because they belong to another tribe's territory, and sometimes for reasons you can't understand even with gestures and simple words. Your ignorance is dangerous not just to yourself but to the whole group, because if you eat something toxic and die, or if you violate territorial boundaries, the consequences affect everyone. The women watch you constantly, correcting you sharply when you make mistakes, treating you like a small child who needs supervision to avoid killing themselves through ignorance. Digging for roots and tubers is exhausting physical labor using wooden digging sticks. The edible roots are often buried deep in hard, dry soil, requiring you to dig for extended periods to extract each root while the sun beats down and insects swarm around you. Your soft modern hands develop blisters that burst and bleed, making the work increasingly painful. The women and children work with practiced efficiency, extracting roots much faster than you can while also watching for snakes, scorpions and other dangers that hide in vegetation and soil. Some of the most nutritious roots are found near water, requiring gatherers to work in areas where crocodiles and hippos pose threats. Collecting insects provides crucial protein and fat. Termites, caterpillars, grasshoppers, beetle larvae, and various other insects are actively gathered and consumed, either fresh or dried for storage. You find the idea of eating insects revolting by modern Western standards, but your revulsion is a luxury you can't afford when you're hungry and when insects provide more reliable protein than hunting large game. The women show you how to locate termite mounds, how to timing harvests for when insects are most abundant, how to process and prepare insects for eating,
and how to avoid the ones that bite, sting, or are toxic. And the act of eating what you've gathered reveals just how strange and often disgusting food sources are when you're living in and it's unlike anything you've eaten before. The antelope the hunters eventually killed is being butchered and cooked over open fires, but cooked means the meat is seared on the outside while remaining quite raw inside because fuel is limited and thorough cooking takes too much time and wood. The meat is tough, stringy, and has strong gamey flavor that's off-putting to your modern palate accustomed to domesticated, grain-fed, aged meat from supermarkets. You're given intestines and organs as your portion. The good cuts go to hunters and high-status individuals, which you must eat or offend the group by refusing food. The gathered plant foods are equally challenging. Bitter roots that make your mouth pucker, leaves with tough fibrous texture that require extensive chewing, fruits that are barely sweet and mostly sour or astringent, and various plant materials that your modern taste buds find completely unpalatable. You force yourself to eat because you're hungry, because refusing food is wasteful and disrespectful, and because you need calories to fuel the physical labor this life requires. But every meal is a struggle between your modern food preferences and the survival necessity of consuming whatever is available. Insects are presented as a delicacy: roasted termites that crunch with a nutty flavor, fat caterpillars that burst in your mouth, grasshoppers with their legs and wings removed and their bodies toasted. The children eat these eagerly, clearly enjoying them, while you gag and force yourself to swallow because you know the protein and fat are necessary for survival. Your revulsion is entertainment for tribal members who find your squeamishness hilarious. They've been eating insects their whole lives and can't understand why you find them disgusting when they're obviously good food. Water is murky and questionable. You're given water from clay pots where sediment has settled to the bottom, but the water still has a muddy taste and probably contains parasites and bacteria your immune system isn't prepared for. You know that drinking this water will make you sick, but you also know that dehydration will kill you faster than waterborne illness. So you drink and hope that your body adapts before the diarrhea and parasites become life-threatening. The tribe boils some water for certain purposes, but fuel is limited and they don't have modern understanding of germ theory to know that boiling kills pathogen. Meat is rarely fully cooked through and food poisoning is common. You watch tribal members eat meat that's barely seared, consuming raw or undercooked flesh that would horrify modern food safety inspectors. The tribe has stronger resistance to foodborne pathogens through lifetime exposure, while your modern gut bacteria are completely unprepared for the microbial load in ancient food. You develop frequent digestive problems, diarrhea, cramping, nausea, that further weaken you and make it difficult to keep down the calories you need to maintain your body weight. Preserving food is done through drying in the sun or smoking over fires. Meat is cut into strips and dried to make something like jerky that can be stored for days or weeks without rotting. Plant foods are dried when abundant to save for scarce periods. The preservation isn't perfect. Dried foods still get infested with insects, develop mold, or are stolen by animals. The tribe doesn't have refrigeration, canning, or any of the modern preservation methods that make food safe and available year-round. When food is abundant, everyone eats well. When hunting and gathering fail, everyone goes hungry, and there's no safety net beyond what the tribe managed to preserve. But while you're struggling with the difficulties of finding and eating unfamiliar food, there's an even more immediate and constant threat to your survival: the dangerous wildlife that views humans as
5e, lions, leopards, and hyenas. The predators that hunt humans, lions in 1500 BCE Africa, are far more numerous and aggressive toward humans than modern lions in protected parks. These are apex predators that have learned through generations that humans are vulnerable prey, especially at night, when isolated, or when injured or sick. The lions around your camp are patient and opportunistic. They probe the camp's defenses regularly, watching for moments of weakness when someone strays too far from the fire, when guards are drowsy, or when an easy meal presents itself. The constant threat of lion attack shapes every aspect of tribal life: where people sleep, when they travel, how they dispose of waste that might attract predators, and the perpetual need for fire and vigilance. Leopards are even more dangerous in some ways because they're solitary, stealthy, and incredibly powerful. A leopard can drag a full-grown human up into a tree where it will consume the body over several days while remaining hidden from other predators and from the victim's tribe. Leopards hunt at night when humans have poor vision. and they're excellent climbers capable of accessing sleeping areas that would be safe from lions. The tribe has lost members to leopard attacks. You hear stories told around evening fires about people who went to relieve themselves at night and never returned, found days later, partially consumed in trees, their screams unheard or coming too late for rescue. Hyenas are despised and feared, not just because they're dangerous, but because they violate human concepts of proper behavior. Hyenas eat the dead, including human dead. They hunt in packs that can overwhelm even large adult humans. Their eerie laughter-like calls at night are unsettling and interpreted as evil spirits or bad omens, and they're willing to enter camps and grab sleeping people or drag away the sick and elderly. The tribe has to guard bodies waiting for burial to prevent hyenas from digging them up. And nighttime requires constant vigilance because hyena packs are bold and persistent when they've identified vulnerable prey. Your first direct encounter with a predator happens when you're relieving yourself away from camp at dusk. You've waited too long, needing privacy that tribal life doesn't really allow. And you've moved far enough from the fire that you're isolated and vulnerable. You hear a sound behind you and turn to see a leopard, low to the ground, ears flat, clearly stalking you as prey. For a moment you freeze in absolute terror, your modern mind unable to process that you're about to be killed and eaten by a wild animal. Your scream brings tribal members running with spears and burning branches, and the leopard vanishes into the bush. But the encounter drives home that you're not at the top of the food chain here. You're prey, and only constant vigilance and group cooperation keep you alive. But large predators aren't the only dangers. Smaller creatures are killing people regularly through venom, disease transmission, and sheer numbers. Snakes, scorpions, and spiders. Venom everywhere. Venomous snakes are ever-present dangers in an environment where people walk barefoot, sleep on the ground, reach into vegetation, and generally interact with their environment in ways that expose them to snake encounters. Puff adders, camouflaged in grass or leaf litter, cobras hiding in burrows or abandoned structures, mambas in trees overhanging paths, and other species that inject venom causing pain, tissue damage, paralysis, or death depending on the species and the victim's size and health. The tribe has herbal treatments for snakebite that might help with some species, or might do nothing except provide psychological comfort, but there's no antivenom, no modern medical intervention, and snakebite victims often die slowly and painfully over hours or days. Someone in the tribe is bitten by a puff adder while gathering firewood. Their leg swells grotesquely, tissue begins to die and turn black around the bite site. And despite the shaman's treatments with plant poultices and rituals to expel poison, the victim deteriorates over several days before dying in agony from the venom and the secondary infection. The death reminds everyone, including you, that injury or illness that would be easily treated in modern times is often fatal here, and that every task, walking, gathering, working, carries risks that can kill you quickly or slowly with no recourse to modern medicine. Scorpions are another constant threat, especially at night. The tribe learns to check shoes if they have them, blankets and clothing before use, because scorpions hide in dark crevices and sting defensively when disturbed. Most scorpion stings are just painful, but some species have venom that can kill children or weaken adults enough to make them vulnerable to other threats. You're stung multiple times by scorpions you didn't see in the dark, experiencing the intense burning pain and the swelling that makes you want to scream. But tribal members just shrug it off as normal part of life and tell you through gestures that the pain will pass, and you probably won't die from this particular species. Spiders, including some venomous species, are everywhere in the tropical subtropical environment. Most spiders are harmless or only mildly venomous, but a few species have bites that cause severe reactions, including necrotic wounds that develop into serious infection. Tribal members are skilled at identifying dangerous versus harmless spiders, but you can't tell the difference and are constantly worried about every spider you see. The tribe mostly tolerates spiders in living areas because they eat insects, including disease-carrying mosquitoes, creating an uncomfortable situation where you're sharing your living space with creatures that terrify you but which the tribe views as beneficial rather than threatening. And while terrestrial creatures are dangerous enough, the water holds the deadliest African wildlife of all. Hippos are deadliest. The river is a death trap. The river that provides water,
fish, and a place to cool off during hot days, is also home to the most dangerous animal in Africa by body count, hippopotamuses. These massive herbivores are territorial and aggressive, killing more humans than any other African animal through unpredictable attacks, capsizing boats, or simply trampling people who get too close to the water or who encounter hippos on land during their nighttime grazing. The tribe knows to approach water cautiously, to listen for hippo grunts and splashing that indicate their presence, and to give them wide berth. But sometimes people need water when hippos are present and have to take risks that occasionally prove fatal. You witness a hippo attack when a woman goes to fill water containers during the day. She approaches the river carefully, checking for visible hippos, and begins filling pots from a shallow area where she thinks it's safe. A hippo emerges from underwater closer than anyone expected. They can hold their breath for several minutes and can approach unseen until they surface right next to their target. The woman sees the hippo, drops her pots and runs, but the hippo is faster than anyone would expect for an animal that size. It catches her within a few body lengths, bites her with jaws powerful enough to snap bones, and thrashes her body violently before returning to the water with its victim, leaving trauma and fear that makes everyone more cautious about water collection, but doesn't change the fact that they still need water and the river is the only source. And they're patient ambush hunters that can wait motionless for hours at water's edge. They position themselves near places where humans regularly access water, learning the tribe's patterns and waiting for opportunities when someone is distracted, isolated, or careless. Crocodile attacks are often fatal because the reptile drags its victim underwater where drowning occurs quickly. Even if the bite wounds themselves aren't immediately lethal, the tribe has lost members to crocodiles regularly enough that everyone knows to be alert when near water, to work in groups rather than alone, to vary their approach points to avoid becoming predictable, and to accept that water collection is dangerous work that kills people despite all precaution. Fishing brings you into direct proximity with both crocodiles and hippos. The tribe fishes using spears, basic hooks made from carved bone, woven traps, and sometimes by building stone barriers that create pools where fish can be more easily caught. All these methods require working in or at the edge of water where attacks can happen instantly. You're terrified every time you're required to participate in fishing, knowing that you're slow, unaware, and would have no chance of surviving if a crocodile grabbed you or if a hippo decided you were too close to its territory. Disease transmission through water is another threat you can't even see. The river water contains parasites including schistosomiasis, transmitted through snail vectors, guinea worm contracted by drinking contaminated, and various bacterial pathogens causing dysentery and other illnesses. The tribe has some resistance through lifetime exposure, but you're vulnerable to all these waterborne diseases, and you're developing chronic diarrhea, parasitic infections, and general weakening that makes you more vulnerable to other threats. Every time you drink the murky water or wade in the river during fishing, you're exposing yourself to microscopic threats that are killing you slowly even as you worry about the visible threats from large predators. And underlying all these immediate physical threats is the spiritual worldview that interprets every danger, illness, and death through religious frameworks you don't understand.
Paganism and ancestor worship. Everything has a spirit to it. The tribal worldview is fundamentally animistic. Everything in the environment has a spirit or spiritual essence. Animals, plants, rivers, even stones and the wind, all possess some form of consciousness or spiritual power that humans must respect and propitiate. This isn't primitive superstition, but rather a sophisticated explanatory framework that helps people make sense of unpredictable natural phenomena, that enforces environmental conservation through spiritual taboos, and that creates social cohesion through shared beliefs and rituals. The spirits aren't metaphorical, they're absolutely real to tribal members who interpret every unusual event as spiritual communication or intervention. Ancestor worship is particularly important because deceased relatives remain part of the community in spiritual form. The ancestors watch over their living descendants, provide guidance through dreams or omens, and can bring blessings or curses depending on whether they're properly honored. The tribe regularly makes offerings to ancestors, pouring libations, leaving food at grave sites, performing ceremonies that acknowledge their continued presence and importance. Your inability to participate meaningfully in ancestor worship, you don't know who your ancestors are supposed to be in this reality, marks you as spiritually disconnected and possibly dangerous. because someone without proper ancestral protection might be vulnerable to malevolent spirits, or might themselves be possessed. Natural features have their own spirits that must be respected. The river has a spirit that controls water availability and that can cause floods or droughts if angered. The baobab tree near camp is sacred and forbidden to cut or damage because its spirit is particularly powerful. Certain rock formations are places where spirits gather and where humans should leave offerings, but not linger. Thunder and lightning are manifestations of sky spirits, whose anger can kill with lightning strikes if they're disrespected. Every aspect of the natural environment is spiritually alive and must be navigated carefully through proper rituals and respect. Animal spirits require special treatment because hunting is spiritually complex. Killing an animal isn't just a physical act, but a spiritual transaction that requires apology to the animal's spirit, thanks for its sacrifice, and proper treatment of its body to avoid angering the animal spirits that might retaliate by making future hunts fail or by sending dangerous animals to attack hunters. The tribe has elaborate rituals before and after hunts involving the shaman asking permission from animal spirits, offering prayers or small sacrifices, and performing ceremonies over killed game that honor the animal and thank its spirit for giving itself to feed the tribe. And the person who mediates between human and spiritual worlds holds tremendous power that shapes every aspect of tribal life. The shaman's power, gateway to the spirit world. The tribal shaman is both spiritual leader and practical healer, wielding authority that comes from their perceived ability to communicate with spirits, interpret omens, and manipulate spiritual forces. The shaman enters trance states through dancing, drumming, chanting, and possibly through use of plant substances that alter consciousness, claiming to visit the spirit world where they negotiate with ancestors, animal spirits, and other supernatural entities on the tribe's behalf. Whether these experiences are genuine spiritual contact or a psychological phenomena doesn't matter to tribal members who absolutely believe in the shaman's power and who attribute successes and failures to the shaman's skill at spiritual diplomacy. Your strange condition, inability to perform basic tasks, speaking wrong language, general incompetence, has been interpreted by the shaman as potential spirit possession. The shaman performs diagnostic rituals including smoke purification, touching you with sacred objects while chanting, examining your reactions to various spiritual tests, and eventually declaring that you're inhabited by a confused or foreign spirit that needs guidance to either leave your body or integrate properly with your human self. The diagnosis is actually quite sophisticated from a psychological perspective. It explains your condition in ways that make sense within tribal belief systems, and that suggest potential treatments that might actually help you adjust and integrate even if the spiritual explanation isn't objectively true. The shaman's treatments include herbal medicines that might have genuine pharmacological effects. Some plants the shaman uses are actually effective as mild sedatives, stimulants, pain relievers, or infection fighter, and modern pharmacology has validated many traditional plant medicines even while rejecting the spiritual explanations for how they work. Other treatments are purely spiritual, rituals, chants, dancing, and ceremonies that might help through placebo effect or through psychological impact of community support and expectation of healing. The shaman's social power extends beyond healing to include mediating disputes, advising the chief on important decisions, determining when to move camp or when to avoid certain areas based on spiritual signs, and generally shaping tribal life through interpretations of omens, dreams, and spiritual communications. If the shaman declares that spirits favor a particular course of action, the tribe will follow that guidance even if it seems irrational from a purely practical perspective. The shaman's word carries weight equivalent to or greater than the chief's in matters involving spiritual dangers or opportunities, creating a power-sharing arrangement where the chief handles practical leadership and the shaman handles spiritual matters. And the rituals that mark important life transitions reveal how deeply spirituality penetrates every aspect of tribal existence. Initiation rites, earning your place through ordeal. The tribe has elaborate coming-of-age ceremonies that mark the transition from childhood to adulthood, and these aren't gentle celebrations but rather serious ordeals that test courage, endurance, and commitment to tribal identity.
Young men undergoing initiation are taken away from camp to a secret location where they're taught adult knowledge, subjected to physical hardships including food deprivation and sleep deprivation, possibly scarified or circumcised as permanent marks of their new status, and required to prove their worth through tasks that might include successful hunts, endurance or demonstrations of skill with weapons and tools. Young women have their own initiation ceremonies that you're not allowed to witness. These female rites are kept secret from men and are overseen by elder women who pass down knowledge about sexuality, childbirth, gathering skills and female roles in tribal society. The ceremonies might include scarification, genital modification in some cultures, a practice that's harmful but which is traditional in some African tribal societies of this era, and tests of domestic skills including food preparation, childcare and craft skills like basket weaving or pottery. Your ambiguous status means the tribe isn't sure whether you need initiation. You have an adult body but lack adult competence, creating debate about whether you were already initiated in some previous life that you can't remember, whether your spirit possession has erased your initiation status, or whether you need to undergo the ceremonies now despite your physical age. The shaman eventually decides that you need a modified initiation ceremony that will either restore your lost abilities or integrate your foreign spirit properly with your human body and tribal identity. Your initiation ordeal is terrifying and painful. You're taken with young initiates to an isolated location, required to fast while participating in days of dancing and ritual activity, subjected to scarification that creates permanent marks on your skin, proving you've undergone initiation, and required to demonstrate competence at basic survival tasks under the observation of senior men who judge whether you've earned the right to adult state. The physical pain of scarification, the exhaustion from dancing and fasting, the fear of failing the tests and being rejected by the tribe, all combine to create a genuinely transformative experience that changes how you view yourself and how the tribe views you. The initiation's psychological impact is profound. The ordeal breaks down your resistance and forces you to accept that you're part of this tribal society now, that your modern identity is irrelevant, and that survival requires becoming a functional tribal member rather than maintaining your outsider status. The shared experience of initiation with other young men creates bonds that begin to integrate you into the social network, giving you allies and age mates who've suffered through the same ordeal and who now view you as one of them. The scarification marks are permanent reminders that you're no longer merely tolerating tribal life, but have formally committed to it through a rite that has deep meaning for everyone who bears the same marks. And as you become more integrated into tribal life through initiation and daily participation, you're also learning about the gender roles and family structures that organize social relationships.
Men hunt, women gather. Division as absolute gender roles in 1500 BCE tribal Africa are rigidly defined and non-negotiable. Men are responsible for hunting large game, warfare, and defense against enemies, making weapons and tools, and providing the protein that's crucial for survival. Women are responsible for gathering plant foods that provide most calories, collecting water and firewood, processing and cooking food, making clothing and containers, and caring for children. These divisions aren't arbitrary or mere social convention. They're survival strategies developed over millennia that allocate labor efficiently based on the physical differences between sexes and the practical demands of different tasks. Men's work is dangerous and high status. Hunting large game requires strength, speed, and willingness to risk injury or death in confrontation with dangerous animals, or when competing with predators for kills. Warfare requires similar physical capabilities and risk tolerance. The men who excel at these dangerous tasks receive higher social status, preferential treatment in food distribution, and access to multiple wives or choice of the most desirable marriage partners. But this privilege comes with the expectation that men will die young, either killed by animals, enemies, or accidents during dangerous work that's assigned specifically to the male role. Women's work is equally essential but differently dangerous. Gathering requires extensive knowledge of plants, insects, and small game, along with the endurance to walk long distances while carrying children and heavy loads of food back to camp. Water collection exposes women to predators at rivers, Firewood collection takes women into areas where snakes and other dangers hide. Childcare is constant physical labor complicated by high infant mortality that means women bear many children knowing that only some will survive. Women's status is tied to their success at these tasks, their fertility and their relationships to powerful men rather than to their own achievements in direct confrontation with danger. The gender division is enforced through tradition, spiritual belief and practical necessity. Men who refuse hunting or fighting are considered cowards or spiritually damaged and face social ostracism or Women who try to take on male roles face similar rejection unless they have special shamanic powers that allow them to transcend gender category. Some societies have concepts like two-spirit people who occupy a third gender category, but for most tribal members there's no flexibility in gender roles. You perform the work assigned to your sex or you're not a fully functional tribal member. Your own performance of gender-appropriate labor has been scrutinized and found lacking, creating problems that need to be resolved through marriage, arranged marriage reality. No choice in the matter in producing children to continue the tribe's existence. Marriages are arranged by elders who consider factors like family status, proven fertility, work skills, and political advantages of uniting particular lineages. The individuals being married have little or no input into the decision. You marry who you're told to marry, when you're told to marry them, and resistance is considered rebellion against tribal authority and family obligation. A marriage is being arranged for you despite your incompetence because the tribe has decided you need a spouse who can manage your affairs and compensate for your shortcomings. A woman who's skilled at women's work but who has some social disadvantage, maybe she's from a lower status family, or is a widow, or has some physical impairment that makes her less desirable to higher status men, is offered to you in exchange for your labor and your commitment to perform male duties to the best of your limited ability. This isn't a romantic pairing but a practical arrangement that benefits both families by resolving the problem of an unmarriageable woman and the problem of your need for supervision and integration. The marriage ceremony is a communal affair involving the entire tribe. There are rituals performed by the shaman invoking fertility blessings and ancestral approval, exchanges of gifts between families that seal the alliance, public declarations of the marriage that make it official in tribal law, and celebrations involving feasting, dancing and ceremonial activities that mark the importance of marriage in tribal continuity. Your participation requires following protocols you don't fully understand, making promises in language you barely speak, and accepting obligations to your new spouse and her family that will define your life going forward. Your wife's expectations of you are based on normal husband capabilities that you lack. She expects you to provide meat through hunting. You can't hunt effectively. To protect her and future children from threats, you're not a competent fighter. To make tools and maintain household equipment, you lack these skills. And to fulfill sexual obligations for reproduction about which you have modern anxieties and concern. She's disappointed by your incompetence but accepts it because she had limited options, and because the tribe has assured her that you'll improve over time as you recover from your spirit affliction or possession. And the family structure you're now part of is more complex than modern nuclear families, involving multiple marriages and communal polygamy and family structure. One wife isn't enough. Polygamy is common in the tribe, with successful hunters and high-status men having multiple wives. This isn't about sexual gratification but about labor allocation and survival strategy. Each wife contributes gathering, food processing, childcare and other essential labor while the husband provides meat from his hunting to support all his wives and their children. Co-wives often work together and support each other, sharing childcare and domestic tasks, creating extended family units that are more efficient and resilient than isolated nuclear families would be in this challenging environment. Your single wife situation reflects your low status. You're not successful enough to support multiple wives, and you're lucky to have one wife willing to marry you given your incompetence at basic male tasks. But even with just one, the family structure is more complex than modern Western marriage because your wife maintains close ties with her birth family who remain involved in her life and your marriage, because you're both part of your husband's family network with obligations to his relative, and because childcare is communal with many adults sharing responsibility for all the tribe's children rather than parents being solely responsible for their own offspring. Children arrive quickly because contraception doesn't exist, and because high infant mortality means women need to have many children to ensure some survive to adulthood.
Your wife becomes pregnant within months of marriage, and the pregnancy brings new anxieties about childbirth, mortality, and infant survival in an environment where modern obstetric care and pediatric medicine don't exist. You're expected to provide extra food for your pregnant wife to protect her from dangers, and to prepare for the additional food needs of a nursing mother and eventually a child who will consume resources before being old enough to contribute labor. Childcare is constant physical labor. Infants must be carried everywhere because they can't be left alone, nursed frequently because there's no formula or alternative feeding, protected from the countless environmental dangers that kill small children, and generally monitored every moment of every day for years before they're old enough to begin taking care of themselves. Your wife's workload is enormous, and you're expected to help by providing security and food while she's occupied with childcare, but your inability to contribute adequately puts additional strain on her and on your relationship. And the reality of raising children in 1500 BCE Africa reveals just how dangerous life is for the most vulnerable tribal members.
Raids and revenge. The drums started at dawn. Not the rhythmic, ceremonial drums you'd grown used to. These were different. Urgent. Sharp. Fast. You woke up to chaos. People were running, grabbing spears, shields made of animal hide. Children were being pulled into huts. Women were shouting orders you still barely understood. And then you saw him, the chief, standing in the center of the village, war paint streaking down his face. Black, red, white, symbols you'd never seen before. He wasn't speaking. He was commanding. Every man over the age of 15 was lining up, including you. Your heart pounded. You wanted to run, hide, disappear, but there was nowhere to go. Someone shoved a spear into your hands. The wood was rough. The stone tip was sharp. It felt heavier than you imagined. This was real. You were about to go to war. But why? You tried to ask, tried to gesture, tried to understand. An older warrior grabbed your shoulder. His grip was iron. He pointed toward the horizon, toward the forest. And then you understood. Another tribe was coming. Not for trade, not for peace, for revenge. Weeks ago, your tribe had raided their village, stolen cattle, taken captives, killed their warriors. Now they were coming to do the same. This wasn't a battle. This was survival. The warriors moved as one unit. No hesitation, no fear, just focus. You followed. Your legs felt weak. Your hands were shaking. But you had no choice, because if you didn't fight, you'd be seen as a coward. And cowards didn't survive here. The forest was silent. Too silent. Every step felt like a trap. Every shadow could be an enemy. And then you heard it. A scream, not from your side, from theirs. The attack had begun. Brutal combat reality. What you saw next would haunt you forever. War in 1500 BCE wasn't organized. It wasn't tactical. It wasn't honorable. It was chaos. Men colliding. Spears thrusting. Clubs smashing. Screams echoing. Blood everywhere. You froze. Your body refused to move. A warrior from the enemy tribe charged at you. His eyes were wild. His spear aimed at your chest. Instinct took over. You dodged. Barely. The spear grazed your shoulder. Pain shot through your arm. You swung your own spear blindly. It connected. The man fell. You didn't know if he was dead or just wounded. You didn't wait to find out. You ran. Back toward your tribe. Back toward safety. But there was no safety. The battlefield was a blur. Bodies on the ground. Some moving. Some not. You saw one of the boys from your tribe. Couldn't have been older than 16. A spear through his stomach. Still breathing. Eyes wide with terror. No one stopped to help him. Because stopping meant dying. You wanted to help. Wanted to do something. But you could. This was the reality of tribal warfare. No medics. No mercy. No second chances. Just survival. The fight lasted maybe 20 minutes. It felt like hours. When it was over, both sides retreated. No winner, no loser, just bodies left behind. Your tribe gathered back at the village. The warriors were chanting, celebrating. But you saw the truth. 3 men from your tribe were dead. 5 were wounded. One would probably die from infection within days. And for what? Revenge, territory, pride. You'd never know, because in this world, war didn't need a reason. It just was, taking slaves and captives. 2 days after the battle, the warriors returned from another raid. This time they weren't alone. They brought captives, 4 people, 2 men, 2 women, hands tied behind their backs, ropes around their necks. They were from the tribe you'd just fought. You watched as they were dragged into the village center. The crowd gathered. The chief stepped forward. What happened next made your stomach turn. The chief inspected them, like cattle, like objects. One of the men was deemed too weak, too old. He was killed on the spot. No trial, no hesitation. Just a club to the head. The others were spared, but not out of mercy. They were now slaves. You'd heard the word before, read about it in history books, seen it in movies, but seeing it in real life was different. These weren't just slaves in some abstract sense. They were people, terrified, broken, hopeless. The 2 remaining men were put to work immediately, hauling water, gathering wood, building shelters. If they resisted, they were beaten. If they tried to escape, they were killed. The 2 women had it worse. They were given to warriors as wives. No choice, no consent, just ownership. You wanted to intervene, wanted to say something, but you were powerless. And deep down you knew the truth. If you spoke out, you'd be next. This was the brutal reality of ancient tribal life. Slavery wasn't a distant concept. It was everyday life. Captives were currency, resources, tools, not humans. You thought about modern morality, human rights, equality. None of that existed here. This was 100 BCE, and you were living in a world where might made right. One night, you lay awake in your hut, the sounds of the village around you. You thought about those captives, about the boy who died in battle, about the violence you'd witnessed, and you realized something terrifying. You were getting used to it. The shock was fading. The horror was becoming normal. You were adapting, and that scared you more than anything else. Because if you could get used to this, what did that say about you? But here's the thing. You had to adapt. Because in this world, sympathy was a weakness. And weakness meant death, parasites and infections. You woke up one morning with a strange sensation in your stomach. Not pain, not quite, just movement. Something was wrong. You tried to ignore it, tried to convince yourself it was nothing, but by midday you knew. You had parasites, intestinal worms, common in this era. Almost everyone had them, but knowing that didn't make it any less horrifying. You felt them moving inside you, feeding on the food you ate, draining your energy. There was no medicine, no pills, no cure, just suffering. You asked the tribe's healer, an old woman with scars covering her arms. She gave you a thick, bitter paste made from crushed roots and insects. You gagged as you swallowed it. She told you to drink it every day for a week. Maybe it would help. Maybe it wouldn't. You had no choice but to trust her. But parasites weren't your only problem. Infections were everywhere. That shoulder wound from the battle? It wasn't healing properly. The cut was red, swollen, hot to the touch. Pus was leaking from it. You knew what that meant. Infection. In the modern world, this would be a minor issue. Some antibiotics. Maybe a bandage. Here, it could kill you. You watched it spread over the next few days. The redness creeping up your arm. You were terrified. The healer came again, this time with a hot blade. She didn't explain. She just grabbed your arm and cut. She sliced open the wound, let the pus drain out. The pain was unbearable. You screamed, tried to pull away, but 2 warriors held you down. She cleaned the wound with water, applied more of that bitter paste, then wrapped it in leaves. You live or you die, she said in broken gestures. That was the extent of medical care here. No guarantees, no painkillers, no sterile equipment, just hope. Over the next week, you watched others in the tribe suffer. A child with a fever, shaking, delirious. The healer tried everything, herbs, rituals, prayer. The child died 3 days later. An older man with a persistent cough. Blood in his phlegm. Tuberculosis, you guessed. Or something similar. He lasted 2 weeks. A woman giving birth. Complications. Both she and the baby died. The tribe mourned for a day, then moved on. Because death was constant here. You couldn't dwell on it. Couldn't let it break you. You just had to keep surviving. Herbal medicine. The tribe's healer was both feared and respected. She wasn't a doctor. She was a combination of herbalist, spiritual guide, and last resort. You started watching her work, trying to understand, trying to learn, because if you got seriously sick, she was your only hope. She had a collection of plants, roots, bark, leaves. Each one supposedly had a purpose. Some stopped bleeding, some reduced fever, some eased pain, but you had no idea which ones actually worked, and which ones were just placebo. One day a warrior came to her with a deep gash on his leg. She crushed a handful of leaves into a paste, applied it directly to the wound. Within days the bleeding stopped. The wound started closing. You were amazed. Was it the plant, or just luck? You'd never know. Another time a woman came with terrible stomach pain. The healer gave her a tea made from bitter roots. The woman vomited violently, then seemed to recover. Was that the cure, or did the vomiting just happen to help? Again, no way to know. The line between medicine and magic was blurred here. The healer performed rituals alongside her treatments, chanting, burning herbs, calling on spirits. Did the spirits help, or was it just the plants? You couldn't tell, but the tribe believed, and belief was powerful. You saw people recover from illnesses that should have killed them, just because they trusted the healer. Placebo effect, faith healing, actual medicine. It didn't matter. In this world, belief and biology were intertwined, and sometimes belief was enough. High death rate. You'd been in the tribe for months now, and you'd lost count of how many people had died. Children, adults, elderly. Death was constant. Infant mortality was staggering. Out of every 10 babies born, maybe 5 survived their first year. Infections, malnutrition, disease, accidents. So many ways to die. You watched a mother lose 3 children in a row, each one dying before their second birthday. She didn't cry anymore. She just accepted it. Because that was life here. The elderly didn't fare much better. Once you passed 40, you were considered old. Most people didn't make it to 50, worn down by a lifetime of hard labor, malnutrition, disease. Their bodies just gave out. You saw a man who was probably only in his mid-40s, but he looked 70, missing teeth, bent spine, barely able to walk. He died quietly one night. No fanfare, no ceremony, just gone. And then there were the accidents. A boy fell from a tree while gathering fruit, broke his neck, died instantly. A woman was bitten by a snake while collecting water, dead within hours. A hunter was trampled by an elephant. His body was barely recognizable. Every day was a gamble. You could do everything right, follow every rule, be careful, and still die, because in 100 BCE, death didn't discriminate. It came for everyone. Young, old, strong, weak. No one was safe. You started to understand why the tribe valued strength so much, why they had so many children, why they celebrated survival. Because survival was rare. You were one of the lucky ones. You'd made it this far, but you knew your luck could run out any day. One bad cut, one infected wound, one wrong plant, and you'd be just another body left behind. That thought kept you up at night, but it also kept you alive, because fear was your greatest motivator. Raising kids in danger. Children in this tribe didn't have a childhood, not in the way you understood it. There were no toys, no games, no school, just survival training. You watched as kids as young as 5 were taught to identify poisonous plants. They learned by trial and error, and sometimes the error was fatal. A little girl once picked the wrong berry, ate it. She was dead by nightfall. The other children watched, learned. That was the lesson. Boys were trained to hunt from the moment they could hold a spear. They practiced on small animals first, rabbits, birds, then graduated to larger prey. By age 10, they were expected to contribute to the tribe's food supply. No excuses, no exceptions. You saw a boy, maybe 8 years old, returned from his first solo hunt, empty-handed. His father beat him in front of the entire tribe, not out of cruelty, out of necessity. Because failure here meant starvation, and starvation meant death. Girls had it different, but no easier. They learned to gather, to cook, to prepare hides. By age 12 they were considered women, ready for marriage, ready for childbirth. You watched a girl, barely a teenager, go through labor. She screamed for hours. No painkillers, no help beyond the healer's hands. She survived, but barely. Her baby didn't make it through the first week. She was expected to try again within months, because that was her role: produce children, keep the tribe alive. No complaints, no choices, just duty. You thought about modern childhood, school, playgrounds, safety. Here children were small adults, expected to work, to fight, to survive. And if they couldn't, they didn't last long. High infant mortality. The crying woke you up. Another baby, another birth. You'd heard it so many times now. The sounds of labor, the screams, the silence that sometimes followed. This time the baby survived. A tiny, fragile thing, barely the size of your forearm. The mother wrapped it in animal hide, held it close, but you could see the fear in her eyes, because she knew that most babies didn't make it. You'd seen it yourself, over and over. Babies born too early, too small, too weak. They lasted days, sometimes hours. Others seemed healthy, but then suddenly stopped breathing. No explanation, no warning, just gone. SIDS, you thought. Or maybe infection, or malnutrition. You'd never know, because in this world, infant death was just normal. The tribe didn't even name children until they were at least a year old. Why get attached to something that probably wouldn't survive? It was cold, practical, but necessary. You watched mothers lose baby after baby. Some stopped trying, their bodies worn out, their spirits broken. Others kept going, kept hoping, because children were the tribe's future. Without them the tribe would die. So they kept trying, kept enduring the pain, the loss, the grief. You admired their strength, but it also broke your heart, because no parent should have to bury their child. Yet here it was expected. One woman had given birth to 9 children. Only 2 survived past age 5. She didn't talk about the others, didn't mourn openly. She just kept working, kept living, because that was the only option. You realized something dark. In this world, love was a luxury. You couldn't afford to love too deeply, because loss was inevitable. So people built walls, protected themselves, cared but not too much, hoped but didn't expect. It was the only way to survive emotionally, and it made you appreciate everything you'd taken for granted in the modern world. Coming of age brutally. You were told to gather by the fire. Something important was happening. 3 boys, all around 13 or 14, stood in the center of the circle. Their faces were painted, their bodies bare except for loincloth. This was their initiation, their passage into manhood. You'd heard whispers about this ritual, but never seen it. Now you were about to. The chief stepped forward, holding a blade, not stone, not wood, metal, rare, valuable, sharp. The first boy stepped forward. No hesitation. The chief raised the blade and cut deep lines across the boy's chest, his shoulders, his back. The boy didn't scream, didn't flinch, just stood there, taking it. Blood ran down his body. The crowd chanted. Drums pounded. This wasn't torture. This was honor. The scars would mark him as a man, a warrior, proof that he could endure pain. The second boy stepped forward. Same ritual, same cuts. He did scream, once, briefly. The crowd jeered. Weakness. He'd carry that shame forever. The third boy didn't make a sound. Not even when the chief cut deeper than before. The crowd erupted in celebration. A true warrior. After the cutting came the next test. The boys were sent into the wilderness. Alone. No food. No water. No weapons except a spear. They had to survive for 5 days. Hunt. Find water. Avoid predators. Return with proof of a kill. If they failed, they weren't men. They were nothing. You watched them disappear into the forest, and wondered how many would come back.
5 days later, 2 returned. One carried the head of a gazelle, the other, a large snake. They were welcomed as men, given adult name, adult responsibilities. The third boy never came back. Search parties found his body a week later, mauled by something. Hyenas, probably. The tribe mourned for a day, then moved on, because that was the risk. Not everyone survived their coming of age, but those who did were respected, feared, but proven. You thought about modern coming of age ceremonies, graduations, bar mitzvahs, sweet 16s. Compared to this, they seemed trivial. Here, becoming an adult meant proving you could survive, proving you were worth keeping alive, and if you could, then you didn't deserve to live. It was harsh, brutal, unfair, but it was reality.
What you learned, Amos. Months had passed. Maybe a year. You'd lost track. Time moved differently here. No calendars, no clocks, just seasons. Rains, dry spells. You were no longer the confused, terrified outsider. You'd adapted, learned, survived. You could start a fire without matches, find water in a dried riverbed, identify edible plants from poisonous ones. You could throw a spear with decent accuracy, skin an animal, prepare a hide. You understood the tribe's language. Not perfectly, but enough. Enough to communicate, to joke, to argue. You'd earned your place, not through intelligence, not through modern knowledge, but through sweat, blood, endurance. You'd proven you weren't useless. And in this world, that was everything. You'd learnt lessons you'd never forget. Lesson 1. Comfort is not a right. In the modern world, you'd complained about minor inconveniences, slow Wi-Fi, cold coffee, a lumpy mattress. Here, you slept on dirt, drank murky water, ate things you'd never imagined eating, and you were grateful for it, because the alternative was starvation. Lesson 2. Strength is survival, not physical strength alone. Mental strength, emotional strength, the ability to keep going when every part of you wanted to quit. You'd seen people die, seen violence, seen suffering, and you'd kept going, because that's what survivors did. Lesson 3. Community is everything. In the modern world, you could survive alone, order food, live in isolation. Here, isolation meant death. You needed the tribe, and the tribe needed you. Everyone had a role. Everyone contributed. If you didn't, you were cast out. And being cast out meant dying alone in the wilderness. Lesson 4. Nature is not your friend. You'd romanticized nature before. Camping trips, hiking, getting back to nature. This wasn't that. Nature here was brutal, unforgiving, indifferent. It didn't care if you lived or died. Lions didn't hunt you because they were evil. They hunted you because they were hungry. Parasites didn't infect you out of malice. They just existed. Nature was neutral, and that made it terrifying. Lesson 5. Death is constant. You'd lost count of how many people you'd seen die. Children, adults, friends. Death wasn't a distant concept. It was daily reality, and you'd learn to accept it. Not because you were heartless, but because if you mourned every loss, you'd never stop crying. So you grieved quickly, then moved on, because life continued, and you had to continue with it. Could you actually survive? You'd survived this long, but could you keep going? Could you live like this forever? Honestly, you didn't know. The physical challenges were brutal, but you'd adapted. Your body was stronger, leaner, tougher. Your hands were calloused. Your skin was scarred. You could endure pain you'd never thought possible. But the mental challenges, those were harder. You missed the modern world, desperately. Missed technology, medicine, safety. Missed being able to call for. Missed knowing that if you got hurt, you'd probably be okay. Here, there were no guarantees. Every day was a gamble, and that constant uncertainty wore on you. You'd seen people break, mentally. A warrior who'd lost his family in a raid. He just stopped. Stopped eating, stopped talking, stopped living. He died within weeks. A woman who'd lost too many children. She walked into the forest one day and never came back. suicide, an accident. You'd never know, but you understood the impulse, the desire to just stop, to escape. But you hadn't broken. Not yet, because you had something they didn't. You had knowledge of another world. You knew this wasn't forever. Somehow, some way, you'd wake up, you'd return. That hope kept you alive. But what if you were wrong? What if this was forever? Could you accept that? Could you let go of the modern world completely? Become fully tribal? You didn't know, and that uncertainty terrified you, because the longer you stayed, the more you changed, the more you forgot. Modern conveniences, modern morality, modern life. It was all fading, and you weren't sure you wanted it to. But you also weren't sure you could stop it, because survival here required letting go of who you were, and becoming who you needed to be. Respecting ancient cultures, you judged them at first. The violence, the slavery, the brutal rituals. You'd thought they were savage, primitive, wrong. But now you understood. These people weren't monsters. They were survivors. Everything they did had a purpose. The violence, protection, deterrence, survival. The slavery, a resource in a world with no other resources. The rituals, community, identity, meaning. They weren't cruel for cruelty's sake. They were doing what they had to do to survive, in a world where nature wanted them dead, where disease was rampant, where food was scarce, where every day was a fight. They'd built a society, not a perfect one, not a kind one, but a functional one, and that was incredible. You thought about modern people judging ancient cultures from the comfort of air-conditioned homes, with full bellies, with modern medicine. It was easy to judge when you'd never faced real hardship, when you'd never had to choose between your morals and your survival. But you'd faced that choice, and you'd compromised. You'd participated in raids, stayed silent during violence, accepted practices you'd once found abhorrent, because the alternative was death. And you wanted to live. Did that make you a bad person, or just a realistic one? You didn't know, but you'd stopped judging the tribe, because they were doing their best, in an impossible situation, just like you. And that deserved respect, not blind admiration, not excuses, but understanding. These were your ancestors. They'd survived so you could exist. They'd endured unimaginable hardship, so that thousands of years later, you could live in comfort. That was worth honoring, worth remembering, worth respecting, because without them you wouldn't be here. None of us would. You opened your eyes. Ceiling, white, clean, a fan spinning slowly above you. You gasped, sat up, looked around. Your room, your bed, your modern life. It was over. You were back. Your heart pounded, your hands shook. You checked your body. No scars, no wounds, no calluses. It was like it never happened. Did happen? Didn't it? You could still smell the smoke, still taste the bitter root paste, still hear the drums. The memories were too vivid, too real. It wasn't just a dream. It couldn't be. You stumbled to the bathroom, turned on the tap, clean water, instant, endless. You almost cried. You looked in the mirror, same face, but different eyes. You'd changed, even if your body hadn't. You thought about everything you'd seen, everything you'd learned, the tribe, the violence, the survival, the loss. It was over, but you'd never forget. You grabbed your phone, charged, connected, modern. You scrolled through social media, people complaining about trivial things, traffic, weather, politics. You wanted to scream. You have no idea how good you have it. But you didn't, because they wouldn't understand. How could they? They'd never slept on dirt, never hunted for food, never watched children die from preventable diseases. They'd never lived in 1500 BCE. But you had, and it changed you. You'd never take clean water for granted again, never waste food, never complain about minor discomfort. Because you knew what real hardship was, and you'd survived it. So here's my question for you. If you woke up in an ancient African tribe tomorrow, could you survive? Could you adapt? Could you let go of everything modern? Drop your thoughts below. Tell me what shocked you most about this story. And if you made it this far, you're stronger than you think. Because just imagining this world takes courage. Now hit that subscribe button, because we've got more time travel nightmares coming your way. Ancient Rome, medieval Europe, Viking Age. Where should we go next? You decide. Sweet dreams, if you can still sleep after this.